good morning, everyone. How is everybody doing today? Get a thumbs up if you're feeling good. Awesome. This is very different. I appreciate you participating today in the Redirecting Career Placement Strategy training. It's great to see all of you. And I hope that this is an interactive session for you and that it's helpful for all of you. So as we hit 11:02, I think what I'll do here is share my screen. Let's see here. Okay, and hopefully you can all see my PowerPoint. Feel free to use that chat box as well if you have a question or the raising hand feature, and would love to hear, some feedback or questions or any conversation from you throughout the session. Okay, so let me take 1 second here. Okay, and okay, back to that. Okay, so hopefully you can all see my screen here. And I'm just going to go and run through program agenda with you so that you guys kind of know what to expect and what the layout and the format of today's training will be. So of course, opening and welcome. Then what I'd like to do is share a summary of some Sidhu School recent graduate and alumni employment data with all of you. Moving on to a career awareness inventory. So we're going to look at specific lists and have you all sort of take an inventory of your work attributes that you're interested in, your skills and strengths, and then finally some lists. And then we'll move on to the brainstorming of career search terms after we complete those inventory exercises. And then finally, resources and job search tutorial. So I hope to walk you through some of the pieces that I've found through Indeed, through LinkedIn, and through Handshake to help facilitate that for you and to help you see what you can get out of doing this exercise. And then finally, closing with a screenshot of sort of everybody in their sign-off wave so that I can capture that for the school. Okay, so moving on to the goals of the training, and let me just stop this share 1 second. And can you all see, as I'm moving through the slides, can you just kind of give me a thumbs up or a head nod if you see me progressing through those slides when I was sharing my screen? Okay, wonderful. Okay, see, I'm not used to this as much as I'd like to be at this point, so I just want to make sure that you guys can see what I'm presenting. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to do sort of a pre-session poll question, and I'll pop that up in just a second. But so that you know, and my goals of this session for you are, one, to motivate you and to motivate your career search, even at this point when we're in September. I want you all to get into a really good mode of how you're going to action plan and how you'll move through this career search strategy so that you have some excitement and so that you have, some less anxiety about moving forward in this journey over the next several months as you, move more towards graduation and the next steps. And then the second one, of course, to alleviate any stress anxiety related to your future plans, whatever you think those future plans might be at this point. So let me move back to the polls, and I'm just going to launch this pre-training poll question for all of you. And if you could just answer that, this is anonymous, so we have 35 participants. And I just want to sort of gauge where your anxieties are right now on job search and on career placement for whenever that point is that you'll graduate, whether it's December or May. So I'll just give that a couple more seconds for everybody to pull in. Okay, great. So let me end that. I'll share the results so you guys can take a look at that. So really, we're right around about the majority of 68% agree that those of you that are participating today have high anxiety on job search and career placement. So I hope to ask you that question in about 40 minutes, and I hope that you feel differently after going through this session this morning. Okay. So let me move back to my PowerPoint. Okay, and that brings me for you guys right into the first portion of this training. What I would like to do, and I'm really speaking specifically now to those of you who feel some stress and some insecurity about what your job placement and what your career placement strategy was pre-pandemic. Okay, so think back before COVID was a thing. What were you planning on doing for your first job? Where were you planning on going? And now a lot of you probably have some anxieties about where you'll end up because some of those industries and some of those jobs are being stifled right now. So my reason for sharing some employment data with you is to communicate something really, really important to all of you as business school students and as Sidhu School graduates. So I'm going to show you two slides. The first one here is employment by industry for first destination Sidhu School graduates. So that means we do a survey of students for what their first job is. Somewhere around April or May, generally, of each year, we will poll students on, the interviews that they had and what their first job looks like and what industry that serves. The second slide I'll show you, and I'll go through this in more detail in just a second, is employment by industry from Sidhu School graduates over the last 10 years. Okay, so slide 1 is first job. Slide 2 is 10 years of career. Okay, so this is a sort of important distinction. So on our first slide here, we have this pie chart and we have all these industries listed. But what I've done with that data is I've pulled out the top 6 industries that our students get a job in as their first destination or as their first job when they leave Wilkes. And as you can see, those top 6 industries for first jobs are accounting, financial services, marketing, management, sports, and hospitality. So can anybody, and let me sort of stop sharing and see if anybody would like to look at that list and tell me, do you notice anything about that list of top 6 industries? Anybody out there? Katie, any thoughts on that? Katie Hester, you're the first person I see.
I just said it wasn't specific. So although you might get a job in marketing where there are a ton of areas of marketing and then like CBD industry, restaurant industry, things like that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and while that's true, what I really want you to notice about this slide, okay, are those top 6 industries that you see for first job. They are all really defined by the majors that we have in the Sidhu School, right? So we have accounting, finance, marketing, management, sports, and hospitality. So that would suggest that there is some security in looking for a job, at least that first position, within your major field of study, right? So if we move on to the next slide, And I can pop that up and show you that. Employment by industry for graduates through their first 10 years of their career. Okay, so this was data from graduates from 2008 through 2019. Okay, so then asking the same questions across the board and trying to see then what happens to our graduates when they go on and they move on to their second job or their third job and their first 10 years, a snapshot of that career. Their top 6 industries for employment, interestingly, are education, accounting services, government, insurance, financial services, and technology. So what can we gather from that list? Any thoughts on that from you guys today? Okay, so what I'd like you to notice about that are those top 6 industries for our graduates who are career professionals are not necessarily lined up with our majors, right? Would you agree with that? So when you're looking at those, sure, we have accounting and sure, we have finance, but when you look at this pie chart and the diversity of different industries that now our graduates are working in beyond that first job, okay, that would suggest a few things. And I'll move on to what that conclusion is in just a second after I share this job salary data. And let me just make sure you guys can see that. Okay, so back to this screen. So job salary data, 65% of our graduates are earning $40,000 or more at their first job. 74% of graduates from 2008 to 18 earn $50,000 or more, and then 56% of graduates from those years, $60,000 or more. So altogether, those 3 slides should suggest a few pretty important things to all of you. And my point with this is to put you all at ease and sort of blast you out of that thinking that you have to look for your first job as indicated and as dictated by what your major is. I want you to get that sort of out of your mind. So some conclusions from this employment data. 1, looking back at these and all of the different colors and just this pie chart would suggest a major diversity of industry, okay, which is really awesome. And it's really highlighted by looking at that pie chart. So that would suggest a flexibility and a strong foundation of Sidhu school education. Okay, so you should feel some pride and some confidence in that. And the second point is that change. That's what I really, really want you to take away from that, is that change to the top 6 industries. And that would suggest, again, for all of you to have some confidence and a really good feeling moving forward, that you have high mobility and you have high options and you have high opportunity. Okay, because when you see that change in industries, that would suggest that those individuals, those alum who we've surveyed, are addressing work preferences. Okay, so maybe they started in marketing, but now they're working in healthcare because it was a better work-life balance. Maybe the pay and the benefits were better. Whatever that might be, work preferences would constitute a lot of different pieces. And second, more importantly, career advancement and promotion. So if somebody starts out in sports management and they're happy and they have a good position, maybe there's just not a lot of advancement or promotion opportunity in that industry for those people. So they move on to something in insurance or technology, education, or in government, and they're highly satisfied with that. Okay, so I want you guys to walk away from that piece of this presentation knowing that you have a lot of prospects and you have a lot of opportunity, and you might have to shift gears a little bit. Maybe you thought you were going to start your career in hospitality or in sports or something else that doesn't look as positive or growing or in demand right now. However, just know that you probably would have switched industries anyway. Okay, so our postgraduate data suggests that our students are doing that. And this survey data was all pre-pandemic. So it doesn't include any of those students yet who have graduated after COVID. Okay, so any questions or comments on that before I move forward? Give you guys just a second. Okay, all right, let me go back to share screen. Okay, so this is the part where I'd like you guys to get out a notebook, piece of paper, a pen, and this is really going to be sort of the workshop or training portion of this session today. So the first thing I'd like you to do is take a look at this slide, and this is going to ask you to really think about a geographical location or an industry, a company position specific that you're interested in working for as your first job. So I want you to pick one or more for each of those things. So geographical location. And maybe you write down your hometown in the state of New York. That's fine. Write it down for now. You don't have to commit to that for the next 8 or 9 months of your search. You can change this. But for the purposes of going through this exercise, I think writing down terms and writing down things on a piece of paper will help you to move through the act of this search, and it will help you to sort of strategize moving forward should you decide to change that geographical location. The second one, I'd like you to write down one or more specific desired companies, industry, or position, okay, any of those things. So again, because you write it down on paper, doesn't mean that you have committed to that company for the next 10 months of your search. It's just an act of putting something down and moving forward through these steps. Okay, so I'll give everyone just a few more seconds to take a look at that. Okay, and if anybody has questions or comments, of course, you can type something in the chat box or unmute yourself and just shout out. The next thing that we'll look at, and I'll give you kind of a rundown here, we're going to look at a few different things in the next few slides. One, an exercise on work attributes, okay? 2, an exercise on skills and strengths inventory. And 3, sort of a self-awareness and a look at interests and abilities. So we're going to start with work attributes. And I'll pop up this slide quickly. Okay, can you all see that? Work attributes or values. I want you to choose 5 of these. So take a couple minutes to look through them. And I'll pop back to this slide just real quickly as you're kind of thinking through that. And I'll go back to the list in a second. But this list should help you all identify the work and personal values that are important to you in your career. So this list includes values and attitudes that are really related to job satisfaction and more of a culture or a working environment, and what those things are at your core that are going to be really important for you in choosing a position or in pursuing a specific company or type of job. So then in this next piece, often there are trade-offs, of course, with values, and part of this process will change for you over time. So the values that you pick today or the work attributes that are important to you today will be very different in 5 years and then in 10 years, for sure. But it's important to have sort of that awareness right now of what are those things that motivate you internally, and what's going to make you happy in a job or in a working environment. Will it be autonomy? So having little or no supervision and being able to move forward without being heavily micromanaged? Is it related to helping other people or having a purposeful job? Would it be job security, recognition, compensation, achievement? Are you highly driven by personal achievement and by completing projects from beginning to end? Leadership, creativity, a variety. So is it important to you that you're not just sitting at a desk in front of a computer every single day for 8 hours a day? Do you want to have some variety in your job of the things that you do and the job functions that you have? Challenge. Do you like to be challenged? Influence, reward, innovation. Okay, so give just a few more seconds for you guys to pick your top 5 work attributes here. And if you need me to go back to this one, I can do that. Okay, so then at this point, we'll move on to your skills inventory, which is a little bit different. So I'm gonna go through this slide with you in a second, but we're gonna look at 3 different areas: analytical skills, communication skills, and managerial skills. Okay, so I have some lists there for each, and you should probably take a look through each of those. We plan on picking 2 or 3 from each of those major umbrella skill areas. But just to introduce this exercise, so skills will reflect your specific abilities and strengths. An assessment of your skills can reveal strengths and how you might use those in a work setting. At this point, you may not realize that many of those skills that you've developed both here at Wilkes, throughout your high school, and really your career as a student, as a member of a sports team, a club, any of those things, that many of those skills are transferable to a variety of work environments. Functional skills reflect that ability to work with people, data, information, or any of those things that you can imagine. And then you can further break down your skills by looking at natural talents as your intellectual, creative, leadership, and problem-solving abilities show through in all of the things that you do. Next point, a simple place to start in identifying your skills is to think about everything. Think about school, think about work, think about your internships, your sports, volunteering opportunities, and even your family and friend life. What are those skills and what are those strengths that really shine through in a series of lists here? Okay, so we'll start with analytical skills. And scanning through these 20 or so analytical skills, how would you rate yourself in looking at these as maybe your top 2 or 3? So are you better at compiling and calculating and analyzing data? Or do you like the less concrete pieces of maybe strategizing and creative thinking and brainstorming? Do you like defined things like budgeting, expenses, computer programming or programming of anything, maintaining records or files? Okay, or on the other side of things, do you like, again, things that are more free-flowing, like researching, observing trends and patterns, strategizing, synthesizing data, researching? So there's really, a lot of different things here, and it's likely that you'll gravitate towards, 2 or 3 that have a sort of common theme to them. Okay, so let me just pop back over here and see if anybody has any questions so far. Any comments, any questions? Good, okay. Okay, so back to the analytical skills. I'll give you guys just a few more seconds to kind of scan through those items and gather your 2 or 3. Okay, So next major umbrella area of skills, looking at communication skills and thinking about what your top strengths are, again, in these 20 different pieces. Do you tend more towards coaching, counseling types of situations, motivating, advocating, promoting, teaching, training? Okay, or on the other side of things, do you prefer, and are your strengths and skills more in the area of perhaps listening, consulting, taking that information in rather than being the one to communicate the information out? Do you prefer writing to speaking? Do you prefer promoting and selling, or listening and consulting? And again, the top 2 or 3 that you really choose from this list, they'll probably have a common theme or a common thread. But again, sort of important to write down those top 2 or 3 communication skills and commit to, you know, what those are at this point. It's likely too that through your careers, things like your analytical skills, your communication, and your managerial skills will change. They'll evolve. And as you gain experience, you'll gain experience in other pieces that maybe you don't have right now. Okay, so last point, and then if you need me to go back to any of these lists, I can do that. But we'll wrap up the skills inventory with managerial and organizational skills. So thinking about, again, these 20 or so terms, where do your best efforts stand? Are you better with organizing, delegating, leading, planning, organizing? Okay, or do you prefer fundraising, recruiting, retaining, setting policies? Think of your clubs, think of your sports. This managerial and organizational skills, I think, has a lot to do with project management. So different projects that you've done in your courses, upper level coursework. This has a lot to do with teams, sports teams, or any kind of clubs or organizations that you're in across campus. So think about your role. Think about the role you play in a team or in a working group. And where do your strengths and where do your skills lie in those managerial and organizational areas? And I'll give you guys just a few more seconds to write down about 3 of those as well. Everybody good? Anyone need more time or need me to go back to any of those lists? Okay. Okay, so on your paper in front of you, you should have a couple things written down so far. You should have at least one geographical location, at least one company or position or industry of interest, at least 5 work attributes or values, and then really around between 8 to 10 total skills or strengths. And then the final sort of piece before we get to the brainstorming area would be looking at your interests. So this one can be difficult because it really does sort of ask you to take a look at your personal life, your personal setting, and flip your thinking of what we were just looking at in the last 4 slides or so. So some questions for you to think about. One, what types of projects do you excel in? Okay, either in a work setting, a school setting, sports, organizations. What types of projects do you really excel in? The second one, what's your favorite subject or course ever? Okay, you can think back to high school if you need to. If you didn't, get everything in yet that you wanted to take here at Wilkes, what's your favorite subject or course? Was it financial investments, or was it printmaking, or was it pottery? Was it public speaking? What was your very, very favorite subject or course that you've had? And that will kind of help lead into the next couple of questions of, what do you enjoy doing in your spare time? Okay, so when you're not working, when you're not doing your internship, when you're not zooming into all of these classes, or going to class or studying or taking exams for Wilkes, what do you enjoy doing in your spare time? Okay, and kind of on that same hand, what are your hobbies? Do you have any hobbies? Do you frequently try to, do new things or try new experiences? What are your hobbies? And what are the things that you enjoy to do? Okay, so I'll give you guys just another minute to complete that. Okay, so now the next two slides I have here are just reflecting on your lists and what you should have down on your paper or on your notebook in front of you. And so just to let you guys know too, so I've gone through and really developed this training or this exercise over the last 3 weeks or so, trying to figure out, what the best inventories were, what the best exercises were, and how to best go through this in steps that would make sense for all of you. So I popped up my lists here, just so that you can kind of take a look. And you should have something similar down on your working area in front of you. So some work attributes, that I looked at in brainstorming search terms would be autonomy, job security, purpose, innovation, and flexibility. And then when I looked at strengths or skills, these were, about 10 that I came up with that are really related to things that I enjoy, things that I think, I excel in, and parts of my current job that, exist and that I enjoy and excel in. Okay, so, and then you should have some interests and then some companies and a geographical location. So some of my interests that I put down here were marketing, strategy, project management, event planning, community engagement, health and wellness, recreation, and outdoor activities. And then my companies, again, I went through this exercise and I've done this for the last 2 weeks to see what I get out of it so that I can share with you what the results of everything ended up being. So, of course, I work here at Wilkes and I'm not currently looking for another job. But if I were, my background and most of my career has been spent in higher education. So looking at, both my situation of, having small children and having children in school, and looking at other companies within a very specific geographical location for me, some of the other higher education institutions that popped up for my interest would be Penn State, King's, Misericordia, and the University of Scranton. Okay, so now what you're going to do with all of those lists is you can see this bubble here on top that says really creating search terms related to your attributes, your skills, your interests, your company, and your geographical location. And I want you to just come up with a bunch of different search terms. And you don't have to complete this part now. This part, I think, will take you a little bit longer than the next minute or so that we'll spend on this slide. But I think that's what I want you to take away from this training, is that after investigating and after looking at those lists, I want you to really brainstorm what you can come up with as search terms that you can put into something like Indeed or something like LinkedIn. So just to sort of, walk you through this exercise and help you imagine what it looks like from my end. So some of the search terms that I used in order to get the results that I got consisted of, again, sort of this very specific geographical location, like within maybe 10, 15, 20 miles radius of Dallas or Wilkes-Barre, PA. Marketing manager, community engagement manager, course training facilitator. Here's the companies, Penn State or institutions, Penn State, Misericordia, University of Scranton, health and wellness marketer, career counselor, training coordinator, and nonprofit. Okay, so this is really sort of combining all of those different terms from the list that you should have in front of you to really brainstorm what those search terms can be. Let me just stop sharing for a second. Does anybody have any questions at this point before I move on? Okay, so after you spend, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 minutes on your list and you come up with this brainstorming, slide or brainstorming sheet of paper with a lot of different search terms that you can plug in to LinkedIn or Indeed or Handshake. I'm going to share my screen with you and pop over to Indeed in just a minute and scan through the positions to show you what I found. But what I did was I took all of this, okay, so all of these terms, all of these things, and I typed every single one of those into Indeed every day, well, every weekday for about 2 weeks to see what I would find. And I spent about, an average 15 to 30 minutes a day. I think probably in the beginning, I was spending more around 30 minutes a day because I was typing in all of those search terms and really looking through. After you do it one time, what will happen when you go on Indeed day after day, it sort of saves some of those results for you. And it'll notify you if there are, new postings in a search term like career counselor in Dallas, PA. Okay, so then you can just kind of go back to it and maybe spend 10 or 15 minutes in the days after you spend that first couple of days really setting it up for yourself. So if I now pop over to Indeed, let me find that for you guys. Okay, so as I said, I went on every day for the last 2 weeks, Monday through Friday, and spent time putting all of those search terms in and just scanning. Now there's a lot of garbage in there, and you guys all know that from having looked for jobs and looking for internships. There's a lot of just junk that pops up that's not relevant, it's not in the area, it has nothing to do, with what you're looking for. So it will take time to sort of scan through some pages and pages of different listings and different search things that come up when you're putting your search terms in. But what I got, and over the last 2 weeks, I've saved 8 positions. Okay, so 8 total positions. And that is, when you go to a posting, at least on Indeed, you can save those so that they're ready and they're there when you want to go back and apply for those. So these 8 positions, and I was really, really excited, I guess, and pleasantly surprised at how they came back, because I thought that this was a really neat exercise to go through just for my own knowledge of what's out there and what might be a next career move or a next career step for me, if I was ready to move into something different. So some of the things that popped up were community program specialist for Geisinger, okay, a relationship strategist for PNC Financial Services Group in Scranton, a marketing content strategist for a company called Cornell Cookson in Mountaintop that manufactures doors, an operations manager for Geisinger. And I'll open this one just so you can kind of see some of the competencies and skills that are listed in this. And this is what you should all be doing. So when you find something that's interesting to you, open it up. Look at the competencies and skills. Look at the experience and education that's required. Look at the job description itself. But these are the types of things that I found. So in this operations manager for Geisinger, which is, of course, a healthcare system, we have demonstrated analytical strategic skills, advanced business expertise in budget management, budget development, market analysis, excellent communication skills, leadership, facilitation, coaching, networking skills. Okay, so when I see stuff like this, I get excited because, you know, it's not something that I would have thought, oh, you know, I want to be an operations manager for Geisinger for a healthcare company for my next position. I would have never come up with that in a million years. But when you start looking and you can really start drilling down to what that job looks like day to day, you can see that this would be a really exciting opportunity and a really exciting career move. Demonstrated decision-making and problem solving and working knowledge of business software systems. Okay, so that's just an example. But all of these, in looking at them and saving these specific positions, I felt that way about all of them. The next one, event manager for Pocono Organics, which I had to look up because I never heard of the company and I didn't know anything about them. A marketing coordinator for a company called Schott, which manufactures glass in Duryea, huge company, global company. And a communications specialist for Geisinger and a community program specialist for Geisinger. So in looking at those, and then let me pop back over to my PowerPoint here. The summary, okay, and so this is really sort of looking at the culmination of this whole exercise and walking through all of this. So what I was able to do, again, and spending that 30 minutes a day, you know, going through and using my search terms from that brainstorming sessions, I pinpointed 8 positions that genuinely would be a really good next step, a really good career move for me. The interesting thing is, and I think this is the point of this session, and this is what I want you to walk away knowing. So the top industries, okay, from the 8 positions that I saved and that I pinpointed consisted of healthcare, financial services, okay, even though it was a relationship strategist, it was for PNC Bank, financial services, manufacturing, okay, so there were 2 manufacturing companies in there, one for glass, one for doors, farming or, / food services. And no, this is the most important thing. None of my preferred industry of education are in there. And right now I face that same reality that all of you face in looking at your next position. So, whether I'm looking for a job right now, or if I'm looking for a job in a year or two, higher education is in a very, very tough spot right now. You all know that, seeing, what's happening and what this pandemic has done to residents living in universities and the challenges that universities across the country are facing from that. I don't know what the future of that is. And obviously right now, there's no demand for jobs in higher education institutions, at least not in the last 3 weeks or so. As I've, looked and kind of combed through all of those postings for the purposes of, coming up with a conclusion for this exercise for all of you, the top industries, again, were healthcare, financial services, manufacturing, and then food and farming services. However, that doesn't have to be a bad thing. I love my job. I love what I do in higher education, and I love the purpose of helping students and advising students in, their development and in their next steps of what they decide to do with their life. But the important thing, I think, to really look at from this exercise is those core job functions that I committed to on paper, that I used for my brainstorming session and that I used for my search terms, they're all weaved throughout those 8 jobs. Okay, so things like community relations, building relationships, event planning, marketing strategy, and communications. So that gives me just a lot of positive outlook. It gives me a lot of excitement, and it gives me peace of mind to know that, maybe my next job won't be at Penn State, Lehman campus, but maybe it'll be at PNC. Okay, or maybe it'll be at Geisinger, and maybe it will be at one of these, growing institutions in this geographical location that I can be really excited about and that I can further develop my career skills in. And I know that the same is true for you guys. If you spend the time going through this, 15 to 30 minutes a day now, you'll get a really good self-awareness, and I think you'll get a really strong excitement about what your future prospects can be, even if it's not what you thought, even if it's not what you intended, 4 years ago when you picked your major. There's still a lot of really, really great stuff out there. There's a lot of demand, there's a lot of growth, and I think that once you go through this and you spend the time every day, you'll get a lot of confidence from doing that. So just in closing, and what I'll do, I'll stop sharing that just for a second to see if you guys have any questions or feedback for a second. Okay, so I do have a question from Katie here in the chat box. So I have been told before, do not be intimidated by the job description, the skills, and the experience. What is your recommendation as far as how many skills should we have or feel comfortable with to apply? Okay, so that's a great question. And I think, I think your answer will come once you spend a few days sort of scanning through job descriptions. So let me pop over here back to these job postings real quick and kind of tell you what I mean. So these positions that I pinpointed, okay, specifically, I'll pick out just a couple to be specific. So a relationship strategist for PNC, a marketing content strategist, or an operations manager for Geisinger. Okay, so those 3 right here. Those are, and I think you have to gauge where your experience is, and you have to gauge a realistic entry level point. So those are 3 positions that they might be a little bit of a stretch for me. However, I would go for it. Okay, so with 14 years of experience personally in higher education, in sales, and in finance, and with the specific skills and pieces on my resume, I would feel confident applying for these 3 jobs, okay, even if they sort of said 15 years of management experience preferred, okay? So I think you have to have a confidence about that, but you also have to be realistic. So now, for example, Katie, if you looked at relationship strategist for PNC Bank, that might be something that you look at and you think, wow, that is really something that excites me, it interests me, I would love to do that. But you would probably look at the job description of that and think, I probably would need one more job in between where I'm at now and applying for that, right? So trying to think about what kind of position can you get to prep you for that. And again, looking at those pieces of transferable skills and, what is some type of position that's just maybe looking for, 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 years experience. I think that that's a reasonable thing for you to apply, you know, within something like that. But that's a really good question. Okay, other questions related to that? Comments? Okay. So let me just pop back on here. Okay, so in closing, I think this method, this exercise should really assist you all in thinking beyond your major. And that's where, you know, I really want you to focus your energy and encourage you to think creatively and critically about what you might enjoy in a career. And again, it might not be that dream job that you thought you were going to have, you know, 4 years ago, and that's why you chose your major, but there are so many exciting and really, really great opportunities for you guys out there. I hope to hear follow-up and feedback from all of you on what you found and what's interesting, what's exciting to you, what was unexpected to you, and maybe some things that you found by going through this exercise day by day. And I would ask that, you know, if I don't hear from you over the next couple of weeks, that whatever you do, include those opportunities and those things that you find in your list, in your final paper for PPD 401 for this class. That way I can kind of gauge, you know, where you're at with those things, and if you found any of that to be beneficial. Oh, I have another question here. So when companies ask for professional experience, does work while at Wilkes count, like a work study? So, you know, Devin, to answer that question, and I think those are really important questions and points to ask, and that's where what I would do is, after you start this process, okay, so this is what I want you to do. Get your brainstorming session done, come up with your search terms, and start to spend some time going through each day, okay, starting to see what comes up and what excites you. Then I want you to schedule individual appointments with me, because Devin, you know, for example, I can sit with you in the office and we could talk about specific projects that you've worked on, achievements, and different pieces to include on your resume. And I can help you determine that on sort of on an individual basis and on an individual project basis to pull out what those major, you know, higher priority or higher skill level things were perhaps in your internship or in your work study position. So we can definitely do that. And that's my hope. And so I'll send a follow-up for you guys after you know, let this sink in and start going through this. And as you get more specific questions and as you get deeper into this search, I can help you on a sort of a one-to-one basis with this as well. Okay. Good questions. Anybody else have questions or comments before we finish up here? Okay, so before you leave, I'm going to launch this polling and ask you all to answer this question again. It's the same question that I popped up in the beginning. I have high anxiety about job search and career placement. And please answer that. And I hope that we've alleviated a little bit of that today and helped you feel a little bit better about that. Give a couple more seconds there. Okay. Great. All right. Well, thank you all so much. It was nice to see everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day, and please get in touch and touch base with me so that we can meet on a one-on-one basis and try to move this forward even more as you move through the weeks. I will see you guys soon. Thank you.